call is now being recorded.
Good evening, everyone. How you doing? This is Dr. Samori Swaggart, and I'm signing in today. We're doing a follow-up and a recap of the 2017 Women's March on Washington. And it wasn't just Washington. It was multiple cities across the country and even globally. There were a lot of marches pertaining to what was actually designed for women's protest and getting out a lot of issues, a lot of hot ticket items on the agenda if you actually went to the website to see what was the objectives. And to help me out, I have on the line with me a journalist, a writer. He's interviewed several great people, has written great articles for several different news sites and blog sites. His name is Mr. Doshon Farad. Doshon, how are you doing?
I'm fine, my friend. How are you?
Oh, man, not bad at all, not bad at all. You know, I had to contact you about this because I know that you were in attendance. We were supposed to meet up, actually, but it was so crowded down there that even though we were literally across the street, we couldn't even connect. It was that many people. But I was like, you know, you're a journalist, and you will have a completely different take or contribution to the dialogue on this 2017 Women's March. So that's why I contacted you, and you know, just want to see if you want to jump in on this story with me, and you obliged. So let's go ahead and do this. Is that cool with you?
I'm fine, my friend.
All right. Well, I just want you to tell me. Now I know you're going to say, well, you know, I need to do some coverage, but what was your reason why you came? Because you came from New York, right?
That is correct, New York City.
All right. So you came from New York early morning and came down to D.C. What was your reason for being in attendance?
Well, as we know, the nation and the world is still in shock over the victory of President Donald J. Trump. His victory literally sent shockwaves across the globe. People are still reeling from it. On Inauguration Day, Friday, January 20th, which was the day before the Women's March on Washington, there were several protests that got physical. And it literally was several police confrontations with protesters who were speaking out against or protesting against the election of President Donald Trump, who they feel is an illegitimate president. They feel that these protesters feel that he is racist. They feel that he is sexist, and even some have called him homophobic, and of course anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, anti-black. And so, as we know, those protests got they got violent, as we could see. Some places were vandalized, and the police ended up having to tear the crowd. So the Millions Women March, which had already been planned since November, there were other people that were protesting across the country since election night, but you had a group of women that had decided to plan the Women's March on Washington, as it was called. Originally, it was called the Million Women's March, but then they got in trouble from the organizers of the original Million Women's March, which was a group of black women. October 1997, actually, I attended that march in Philadelphia at Ben Franklin Park. Mm-hmm. But many of these women felt that because of Trump's remarks during the campaign and his marks years past, they feel proved that he's sexist and misogynist. And they feel that he's a threat they feel that if he were to appoint Supreme Court judges who are conservative, it will reverse everything that women have accomplished over the past 50 years in particular. Some feel that he will appoint judges that will reverse everything that black people have supposedly accomplished over the past 50 years since the civil rights and black power movements. So these women, at first mostly white, mostly from, I would say, from a upper class background, some poor, they called this march. They decided to call it to say to Donald Trump that they're not going to tolerate any policy of his that may be deemed misogynist or sexist, if you would, dealing with reproductive
patriarchal.
Right, right, definitely. Dealing with reproductive rights in particular, abortion, and that's the main issue with a lot of women regarding having Republicans in power. Many women's rights activists feel that Republicans or the GOP or conservatives, by and large, are anti-women's choice. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So these women, among other things, they came together around these issues. Equality for women, reproductive rights. When they say equality for women, they also mean fairer wages, equal pay for women, because as we know, women, for the most part, the majority of women do not make as much as men. That's in America. So these women were protesting that. And many of these women fear that a Donald Trump or a Republican presidency, along with the Republican-controlled Congress, will be a hindrance to what these women are trying to accomplish. Okay, so I went down there to gather the thoughts of these women and men who attended, asking them why they attended, for what reason they were there. And I spoke to some very interesting people along the way while I was there. And I was there literally from start to, you could say, almost finish. I started walking with them from Independence Avenue and 4th, Northwest, all the way to, where were we? I believe we were at 16th Street, 16th and K Street, Northwest. And when I dipped off, to go to an event that was affiliated with the Women's March on Washington, they were still marching up the street. And it should be something to know that all the Starbucks in D.C. were closed on Saturday because the Friday before, one of the Starbucks had been vandalized while they were patrons aside, vandalized by one of the, according to the news, CNN and AP and NBC, by one of the anti-Trump protesters. So the Starbucks was closed on Saturday anyway. Yes,
is that those people that were like dressed in black and all of that?
When we say dressed in black, I'm not. You mean?
I was watching some coverage. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
No, I just know I was watching some television coverage, and there was like this group of people, and they were all dressed in black. They had the black mask over their face. And they were ones that were like, kicking in. I mean, you could tell that they were, they were not African American. They looked either white or Asian, like maybe like a Chinese, probably, if I'm not framing it right. But they definitely were not black. They were not. They didn't look like they were probably of Latino persuasion. They were kicking in the Bank of America window. They had these poles that they were like breaking up the I think Starbucks, and there was a lot of other places.
Right, there were other places that got vandalized. Right.
Yeah.
A lot of places that the supposed anti-Trump demonstrators were vandalizing. Yeah, you're right. But like I said, but still, Starbucks is closed. I'm not aware of the other businesses closing on Saturday. But Starbucks definitely was across D.C. They weren't taking any chances, even though there were no arrests reported during the Women's March on Washington. There were no conflicts with the police. They, as I was told while I was there and after, you read news reports, you read news reports and you'll see, like in NBCnews.com, ABCnews.com, read articles online like that there were no even incidents with police, that the marchers said that the police cooperated with them and vice versa. And you even find some marchers that even thank the police for helping to provide security for the march.
Okay. All right. Well, now I want you to do this for me now. I want you to tell me, I want you to think of like, the 5 senses of the human body. I want you to use 3 of them. If you're able to recall and reflect, tell me what you heard, what you remember hearing, what you remember seeing, and what you remember feeling while you were there in that whole time. Because you got in town early, like around 6 in the morning, right?
No, before that.
Oh, wow, yeah.
No, before that. I arrived in D.C. after 3:30 a.m. And on the
Oh,
way
wow.
down, they were on my transport. On the way down, okay, on the train that I caught uh, during that time, on my transport, I would say there were I was on with women who were in attendance. Now, of course, we know that usually after 3 o'clock, we know that actually, like in D.C., like after midnight, like in Chinatown or in that area near Union Station, D.C. is going to be empty for the most part. Actually, period. Okay, all across D.C. It's not like New York City, okay, or Philadelphia. So by the time I got down there after 3:30 a.m., there were people arriving, and I could see people like waiting. There were people that were like either some people were waiting for the sun to come up. Some people were even sleeping uh, in the area of the march and the rally. I should say the rally first, of course, then the march. There were people that got in. And D.C. is known for that. You have people that would do that. They've done that for marches for decades, whether it was the Million Man March, whether it was anti-war marches. You have people that have done that in D.C. They'll come the night. People from out of town will come the night before, or a few hours before. Right, they'll camp out. So you actually saw that in like as you were, you saw that like across D.C. Certain people either in the Capitol area, I should say, the Capitol Hill area, who were waiting. They were actually waiting with literature, but they set up there early. So anyway, when I got there, I could the passion surrounding the event, or the passion that was emanating from the marchers, grew as the day grew. It grew as the day progressed. So it was literally okay, imagine waking up in the morning. You wake up in the morning and then, you're tired. But then what happens as your day progresses, you're at full throttle. That was the feeling that's what I witnessed. That was the feeling I got from the march, from from the beginning. It started out as down because people have to arrive, and people have to get to the rally area. People have to walk to the rally area, you could feel that energy increasing. Now, this is what happened. Okay, I purposely waited around Union Station. I didn't check into a hotel. I purposely waited at Union Station just to witness people come in, just to do, so I could be able to tell our listeners what I'm doing now. Okay, and that is I was observing the people that were coming in. So by 6:00 a.m. That's when Union Station started to get swelled. People were coming in from trains, of course. They were coming up from the airport, but the airport, Dulles and Reagan International, they have train routes. But you also have people coming in from like Maryland, coming in from Virginia, the surrounding areas. People that flew in, and they, of course, many of the hotels are booked. All right. You had people that came in from different parts of the country who stayed in hotels or with friends and relatives at the surrounding areas. And so Union Station, quite naturally, that was for many was the meeting point, okay? Because keep in mind, I should say en route, it was the meeting point because keep in mind, Union Station is on Capitol Hill. That's Capitol Hill. You see the Capitol, the dome of the Capitol right across the street. And then Independence Avenue is a rather short walk away. I would say it's for some people, it'd be a nice long walk, a nice little walk. Okay, so people were coming in. Most people I saw, like I said, Union Station was swelling. It was swelling, so the rally was due to start at 10 a.m. But you have people getting there by there were people that were already at the rally site, as I was told, by 4 o'clock. Some people had spent the night there, like I said, but they started setting up at 4 o'clock a.m. The sound system and all that. But you had people that were arriving, marchers that were arriving in. They were swelling in Union Station. All of a sudden, this is what you saw at a certain point by 7 o'clock. I would say, by 7:30, as it was approaching 8 o'clock a.m., you saw women and men marchers, mainly women, with their signs. Okay, with some of the signs that I'd rather not repeat on the air, but these signs were they were focused on focused on women's empowerment.
Someone was targeted at Trump directly too.
Right. Of course, those are the signs I don't want to repeat. For example, when Trump said that he grabbed women by the vaginas in that tape that they played during the campaign, you had a sign that said that, and I'm saying it the nice way, this vagina grabs back. And then you also saw women and men, but mainly women, of course, as it was a majority. It was a women's march. Were wearing pink caps with cat ears, and that was supposed to symbolize, as I was told by several of the marchers, it was supposed to symbolize a woman's vagina, but they were calling it the other word, the P word that goes with cat. Okay. Which, by the way, I know a woman, a married woman who considers herself a womanist, not a feminist, who actually had a problem with that, who I actually spoke with last night. She had a problem with that. She said to me, look, if you're talking about women's empowerment, why are you degrading yourself to that part of your body that men have exploited for centuries? You know, she had a problem with that. In this particular situation, like I said, she's for women's liberation, women's rights, but she had a problem with that, and I realized that there were other women that had a problem with that. And I'm going to be honest with you, I kind of thought that it was somewhat contradictory. So when she had mentioned it to me, I said, oh, it's not just me. But you saw these hats all over, like I said, these hats that look like horns, not horns, but it has cat ears. And it's pink, which is oftentimes at many events, many feminist events, many events that surround women, you see the color pink as the dominant color. So these are pink hats with cat ears that resemble cat's ears on purpose. So anyway, like I said, that's what you saw swelling into Union Station. And like I said, I mean, you kept seeing people pouring in. And by the time I got to the rally site, which literally it was, I got there, of course, in advance, way before 10 o'clock. Rather, I couldn't make it to the stage. And I actually reported on that. I was giving people video updates. I could not make it to the stage area because there was already that many people that were there before the march before the rally had begun at 10 a.m. The march had begun a little after 1 o'clock. Actually, I would say maybe towards 1:30 or a little after 1:30. But this is what you saw. Like I said, you saw a sea of pink pour into D.C. and cover D.C. Covered the district like a blanket. D.C. was blanketed with pink.
Yeah, I saw that too. It was literally like an ocean.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
A sea of pink. As I said, a sea of pink. I mean, I said yes.
Let me ask you this now. Did you see a disparity in the representation of the different demographics that were in attendance? Like, there's white women as opposed to black women, Latino, Asian, East Indian, things like that. What did you see? What did you take?
Well, keep in mind, days prior to the march, literally like days prior, not even 2 weeks before the march, there was some controversy that had erupted on the part of black and Latino women in particular, because they felt that this march was only geared towards white women, rich white women in particular. Now, keep in mind, one of the issues with that many black feminists have raised, or black women have raised, concerning feminism, is that the criticism for decades has been that feminism has really been a rich white woman's movement. Notice what I said, rich white woman, meaning that not only did it just reach out to only white women, it reached out to rich white women in particular. And then later on, they went to, poor white women and black women just to get extra allies. But that's been a criticism. So that's actually what I thought about. I thought about, too, when you mentioned demographics. Well, anyway, this is what happened. There were several black women and several Latino women who, writers and media people, columnists who wrote in support of the march, such as Julian Malveaux. And then you had others who were against the march, such as there's a particular sister that wrote an article for Color of Change. It escapes me right now. But Dr. Julian Malveaux wrote an article saying why black women should attend this march. And Dr. Julian Malveaux, I consider her a wonderful friend. She was there. She was actually up on stage. I consider Dr. Malveaux, like I said, I think the world of her. So I'm not at all knocking her for writing that article, but there's another sister, Color of Change. She wrote an article explaining that she felt that what I said, that it was mainly about it was about pushing white women's rights ahead. Now keep in mind, whenever you hear people, many conservatives or Republicans speak about affirmative action being reverse discrimination created to help only black people. Since affirmative action was created, by the way, I think in 1974, I could be wrong, under Nixon, a Republican.
Okay.
I believe I may be inaccurate there, brother, and to our listeners, please forgive me if I'm inaccurate, but I believe it was definitely during Nixon's term, affirmative action. But anyway, keep in mind that to this day, white women are the majority of the beneficiaries of affirmative action. Over 80% has always gone to white women. The rest of that goes to those of us who are the so-called minorities, blacks, Native Americans, Asians, et cetera, okay? So, that's what was addressed by many African American women and many Latino women who were writing articles, in opposition to the march. That was the point that they were raising, that, that white women have always, even though women are oppressed, period, but white women have always had an edge for being white, especially if you're rich. Here we go back to the subject of white privilege. And so the criticism has been with feminism, like I said, is that oftentimes, black women, poor women, but black women in particular, Latino women in particular, were pushed to the back. And Angela Davis writes about this in one of her books. I believe the name of her book is Race and Class. I believe she wrote several years ago. But she introduced the term in that book. I'm not sure if she coined the term, but I'm not sure if she created it, but it's a term called womanism. And womanism.
She quotes it. It came from Alice Walker.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you, Samar, because for the longest I've been trying to figure out. I said, wait a minute, I got to make sure. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. But right, so you know what I'm talking. You know the book I'm speaking about. So, and you know where that came from, womanism. So you find you have, okay, look at it like this. Okay. Most of those who call themselves womanists are black women, but you're not going to find too many white women calling themselves womanists. You'll find white women who advocate women's rights. They refer to as feminists. Okay, and unfortunately, feminism oftentimes has been, in its extreme form, has been seen as being anti-man, whereas womanism says you can be for women's rights without being anti-man. Okay, so anyway, what I saw, like I said, these columnists, they were saying they weren't coming to the march for that reason. They felt that it was too focused on white women's rights, and what they were saying was, no, we need to keep this march focused on women, but also on the issues of so-called women of color. And that's where you have, that's when they reached out to three good friends of mine who I've worked with in the Justice League. Linda Sassor, she's over I believe the Arab American League out of New York. And by the way, they started coming at her on the internet because they tried to say that it was a terrorist march because they had Muslims. She's a Muslim, Palestinian Muslim, non-white Palestinian. Right.
Wow.
And then you have, they reached out to Carmen Perez. She is the executive director of the Gathering of Justice. Okay, Latino sister. She Mexican. She's a light-skinned Latino who identifies with her African roots. Okay, she's Mexican, Mexicano. And then you have Tamika Mallory, African American woman, so-called African American woman. I don't like using that term too often, African American, but that's another story. She she was the executive director for the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton's organization. Okay, and she had resigned. She had that position for like maybe 4 or 5 years. All these three women are very talented, but the organizers of the Women's March had reached out to these three women to be co-chairs. Now, some say that they did it as a strategy, as a way of attracting, once again, black women and Latino women and other so-called women of color as a way of gaining numbers, which is what the feminist movement was accused of doing in the 60s. Trying to get black allies, and of course
get that numerical strength.
Right, that numerical strength, and of course other communities have been accused of doing that. Italians, Jews, gays, and lesbians have been accused of using black people to advance their agenda. Okay, so you actually had a case of that, and so the articles that were written in opposition of the march by black women and other non-white women was that this is the same old that we've been dealing with for 50, 60 years. That's what that was their mentality. Okay, so and it's funny, brother, because that when I was down there, it was a journalist. She's a young journalist. She's a student, at North Carolina A&T. Okay, and she, this particular sister, she's another Afro-Latino. Okay, and she had a sign that said, "I'm a proud Afro-Latino woman." And the reason she did that was because she noticed days before that it seemed like that the march was only catered or geared towards white women. So she came up from North Carolina with her sign that said that. Okay, and so when I went down there, I'm gonna be honest with you, dear brother. Now listen up. I knew. Okay, keep in mind, I was looking around too for, black and brown women, all right? And I'm sitting up because, because it was supposed to be so diverse, Women's March. When you go to their website, they were propping it up as being diverse. They had these 3 women of color co-chairing, as I said. They reached out to them. 3 women of color who were very popular, who I've worked with, co-chairing. And they, so when I went down there, I was looking for black and brown women too. So, and I'm like, wow, I'm like, wow. I said, now listen, you have a right to invite who you want to your march, but if you're propping it up as something, you understand where I'm coming from? And but it's something else, that's when it becomes a problem, and you have to ask yourself the question, well, wait a minute, even though the march was being lauded as a diverse march for women, period, in America, it was even, just to let you know too, Brother Samari, that the march had other issues on the table. Like I said, they were fighting against Islamophobia. They were fighting against homophobia. There were other issues. But, of course, they have women as the focus, and there's nothing wrong with that. They have women as the focus. So women catch a lot of hell, okay? But at the same time, they were trying to make it appear as if though, like women of all so-called racial backgrounds. But when you got there, it was a majority white women. And so, and I interviewed several people. I interviewed 2 black women. I interviewed 1 white woman. I interviewed a man, okay, and the 2 black women, that was their concern. Like, okay, like, they supported the march, but they did say in a very nice way, but they did mention, they didn't say where all the sisters at. They didn't say where all the black women, but they did say, it's important that, that women of all backgrounds, the needs have to still be addressed. That's what both of these 2 said. One of them was an AKA, Yosora. Okay. And another one was a school teacher. Another one was a school teacher, a black woman. So I interviewed a white woman school teacher, a black woman school teacher, and the AKA, she wasn't an educator. But anyway, the 2 black women I interviewed, they was, like I said, they said it's a very, good thing. Women need to come together, issues that affect them, but at the same time, make sure that it's not exclusive, especially if you're promoting diversity. Right. Now, go. Yeah.
No. Go ahead.
Now, and I was thinking about this. Now, see, the Million Women's March, okay? Now, in 1997, October 27, 1997, that I attended, I believe it was October 27, that I attended when I was 20 years old in Philadelphia, they made clear that its focus was black women. You understand where I'm from? They made clear there was no deception involved, and I'm not at all accusing the Women's March at this point of being deceptive, okay? But the Million Women's March, which was organized by Sister Filet out of Philadelphia, who I know, okay, they said from the beginning that this is a march that that's honoring, all women are sacred, but we have to honor black women because black women catch the most hell in America. Yeah, okay, out of in terms of the women, you understand where I'm coming from? In terms of women's rights. Okay, they live in a racist and a sexist society. Okay, so that's like I say. So that's something different. They said it's for black women. They didn't say, oh, it's for all of us of the human family, the rainbow, and then you show up, it's a bunch of dark folk. Okay, but they said it was diverse, and we showed up, and the 600,000 people, and I observed this. It was majority white women who appear, based on their conversations, they appeared to be from well-to-do backgrounds. So I really didn't see. I would say, brother, that yes, you did see some from like rather diverse financial backgrounds, but you saw a considerable amount of white women from upper backgrounds based on their conversations, talking about their schooling, some of them were wearing, their Ivy League college jerseys, that type of stuff,
Right. So different things that will identify them by class or social structure.
Right, and they right, and
sharing.
they like I say it right, and their conversation, listening to them, in their conversation. But go ahead, yes, sir.
So you would say that the narrative of the website didn't necessarily match what manifested in the march.
Well, I should say, brother, racial-wise, I would say racial-wise.
Racial-wise,
yeah.
right.
Racial-wise, right.
The diversity.
Right.
You hit it right on the head.
Right.
Okay. Let me ask you, let me ask this, because I know, being that we're talking about this now, I remember I was telling you earlier, you were saying that Minister Farrakhan's granddaughter was in attendance?
Well, yes, his adopted granddaughter, Sister Yonaja Lone Wolf. She's she'll let you know she'll say she's a Black/Native American activist. She's a musician. She's a singer. Because you had several, you had Native American women, because the stuff that, as they would say, indigenous, the stuff that they've done to indigenous women, okay, brother, in this country, sterilizing them, keeping them from having babies. They had to be represented, brother, because, you can't talk about women's rights in America. Once again, that was another issue that was said, make sure that you address the indigenous, what they're doing to indigenous women to this day on the reservations. Okay, brother,
right.
they would say, so they have to be represented, brother, definitely. But yes, Yonaja Lone Wolf, who I interviewed for us, Your Black World, several months ago, concerning what's taking place in Stone. I'm saying, brother, hold on, brother. I don't want to mess it up. Stone Rock, am I saying it, brother? No, you know what I'm talking about. That's about
Standing Rock? Standing Rock?
Standing Rock. Pardon me, brother. Standing Rock. Thank you, brother. So please pardon my to our red brothers and sisters. Sorry about that. But keep in mind, the American Indian movement was there, and I actually interviewed another sister who has been at Standing Rock, a Native American sister, about what's going on. But yes, Minister Farrakhan's granddaughter, she performed. She performed, brother. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna read off some of the names, because I went to the website,
yes.
And they have some good things. Like they have what's called unity principles, and so this is where you saw the diversity of agendas. This is why when you went there, it wasn't just all women's rights signs and placards. You had like fair wage signs, because you had like the whole labor and wage issue that they want to address between the equity and the disparities of women's wages compared to men, talking about the maternity leave and things of that nature. You had the reproductive rights. They also were talking about environmental rights. They were this is what I'm saying. They call them unity principles, where it wasn't necessarily just saying, hey, we're targeting women, but they were saying, listen, we invite everybody to bring these different issues to the table, and we'll all unite under this banner. And so you had that. You had the LGBTQIA a movement. You had the Latinos movement. You had it was a lot. It was like a scientific community out there. So these were all coming in. But I want to read off this. When you go to the website, they have the I think it's called the artist table. So it's called the artist table, and they list it's a lot, but they list a lot of people that were in support of the march. So I'm gonna read off some of them to you. Some of them you already mentioned, and if any ideas come to your mind from these names, just let me know. But some start. They had Angela Davis, Janelle Monáe, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, Tamika Mallory, Talib Kweli, Rakim, Alicia Keys, Amber Rose, Michaela Angela Davis, Robert De Niro, Teray, Tracy Ellis Ross, Cree Summers from A Different World, Cher, who's this? Marissa Tomei, Rosario Dawson, Lupita Nyong'o, Leslie Jones, MC Light. So they had like a lot of people. Now that was just like a little bit. I was just grabbing like a little bit, but it's a very long list.
Well, family, of course, and all of them were not there. But they did give their support of the march. That's why they were mentioned on the artist table. Now, of course, Maxwell was there, MC Light, Janelle Monáe, Jeanette, if I'm pronouncing her name, she's one of the actresses, I believe, in Hidden Figures.
Janelle Monáe.
I'm sure she is. Right, yeah, of course she is. Taraji wasn't there, unfortunately. But you had Alicia Keys, MC Light, the three of them were up at the same time. They were there, and they each spoke. And I believe Alicia had sang. But MC Light, it was wonderful to see them. But I didn't see Miss Ross, Tracy Ellis Ross, Diana Ross' daughter, the actress. Of course, I didn't see her there. But Maxwell performed. Talib, some of them artists who were mentioned, they did say that they're not definite. Their appearance wasn't definite, but nevertheless they gave their appearance. But yes, they definitely had a wide array of very popular artists and entertainers, celebrities. So that it was powerful. Definitely in terms of that, it was in terms of who they had representing, who they had a part of the program. And of course, Michael Moore, filmmaker Michael Moore, he helped them see it. And of course, you had up there, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Julia Malveaux, she was on stage. And of course, you have Michaela Angela Davis. Yeah, of course, you had Dr. Angela Davis, which I should have mentioned earlier, brother, when I mentioned her book. I should have mentioned that she was there. She spoke. She spoke in that same time frame that Alicia Keys and MC Light and Miss Monáe did. But then, of course, you have Michaela Angela Davis, who was a CNN contributor and a writer. She had spoke as well. And of course, we have to mention actually who was mainly emceed by, make it clear, it was mainly emceed by Linda Sarsour, Carmen Perez, and Tamika Mallory, who I mentioned earlier. They were the co-chairs, and they moderated it wonderfully, as they're known for doing. But that was a strategy. They did that. I believe that the organizers attempted to do that to show, it's not just about white women. It's about all of us, all women, but there's still people who are not buying that. I know I'm certainly not. But in my modest, I'm not speaking as a journalist now. I'm speaking as a commentator. I can be opinionated right now. My modest pundit opinion. My modest commentator opinion.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you two more questions so, it won't get too long for the people. I want to know, can you speak on, historically, when it comes to, the women's marches? I know, you and I talked before, what people know is the two phases, and Sojourner Truth and Ivy B. Wells, and women's suffrage. If you could speak on that.
Well, definitely. Keep in mind, as I was mentioning, the controversy about black women and other non-white women being excluded. I posted several hours before the march had begun. In fact, as I was en route I wasn't even en route. I was already in D.C. when I was at Union Station, observing people coming in. I did a post, literally maybe at 4 a.m. that morning, reminding the marchers and other supporters, not just in D.C., but marches across the country. Because keep in mind, you had other cities that had women's marches at the same time. It was strategic. You had 370 marches in every state across the United States. But guess what? You even had a women's march in Antarctica. In Antarctica. Now, the only people that live in Antarctica are scientists, okay? Or you might find some frozen aliens, maybe ETs, but that's another story. But they had a women's march. Yeah, so it was. But you had marches, across the world. But you definitely had a march in every state. You had a march, in every state, okay, in the United States. Of course, you had, besides D.C., you had New York, you had Philadelphia, you had Atlanta, you had Los Angeles, if my memory recalls. I believe you had Los Angeles, but across the country, family. I'm talking about And many of those places had topped over 100,000. Okay, now Atlanta had maybe 90,000, but many places had topped over 100,000. Many places. Okay, I know New York certainly did, and I believe Philly did. Of course, Chicago, I believe had 120. New York had 150,000. But Chicago, I know, definitely had well over 100. So if I say 120, I could be wrong, but it definitely topped 100,000. New York, 150,000. If I read the report properly in, what was that, New York Daily News or NBC? Anyway, what I mentioned was, I said that all these women who are marching across the country and all these men that are supporting the Women's March in D.C., don't forget the role of Sojourner Truth and other black women who took part in the women's rights movement, okay, the pioneers, okay. Now, keep in mind that you had two phases of the women's rights movement in America, two main phases. Of course, they went through other phases. You had the suffrage movement, which took place in the 19th century, which Sojourner Truth and other black women were heavily involved with, okay. And Sojourner Truth had went throughout the country speaking against the injustices of slavery and racism and sexism against black people, racism against black people, but sexism against black women, the brutality of black women. The brutality that black women endured. We have to understand, dear brother, when we talk about 100 years of lynching, we cannot forget the amount of women who were also lynched during that time period, during slavery and the period immediately following slavery. And when you read the book 100 Years of Lynching, it shows articles that talk about this. And also the book Without Sanctuary talks about this. It shows photographs of black women who were lynched, but also a professor of mine, Dr. Daniel Metters, history professor at William Patterson University, he's still there. He wrote a book several years ago. He co-wrote a book several years ago titled, I think it's called Black Women Who Were Lynched, or Black Women Lynchings in the U.S., one of the two titles, okay, something along those lines. And he speaks about that, okay, the amount of black women who were lynched. And he was the one that caused me to research that, okay. But yeah, there were black women who were lynched. So keep in mind that black women were lynched, and they were, what black women had to experience living in a racist and a sexist society, okay. As Dick Gregory once said, black women not only have to worry about, he said, black women have to worry about crazy white folks and me, meaning black men. Okay, we have to talk about, okay, so black, and Shirley Chisholm, she spoke about that, but we have to speak about black women, the struggles of black women. Like I said, white women live in a sexist society. Black women live in a racist, they live in a racist and a sexist society. Okay, so they're putting up with, like I said, racism from white folks, but the sexism coming from us as black men, and we have to address that as black men. Okay, we have to address that. So anyway, Sojourner Truth, like I said, the first phase was the suffrage movement. That was in the 19th century, where women were, they were rebelling against the sexism of men, their husbands, their fathers, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the second phase of the women's rights movement, which was in the 60s, which was it was inspired by the civil rights movement, the activism of the civil rights movement. Okay, and that's that's actually how white women came to be the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action. But you cannot speak about women's rights without mentioning the black women that they were, like I said, they were catching hell for being black and women at the same time. So they were fighting against racism as well as sexism. So they were fighting for equal rights racially as well as gender-wise. Okay, so Sojourner Truth was a pioneer in that. She went across the country speaking about that, and of course, Bell Hooks, one of Bell Hooks' books, Dr. Bell Hooks, he teaches at the New School, but well-known literary scholar. Bell Hooks wrote a book called Ain't I a Woman? And she got that phrase from Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was known for being very bold and very brash. She was straightforward. Okay, some people even thought that she was aggressive. Anytime black folk speak our mind, we're always aggressive. But there were a lot of people that thought because of her her strong African features. You know, she was beautiful dark sister with a beautiful broad nose, okay, and you know, the lips. And you know how that is with black people, with black women. Anytime black women are dark and have beautiful features, have beautiful African features, and they speak very confidently, the first thing people want to do is accuse them of being men. You know, look how they're treating Serena Williams. Look how they treated Michelle Obama.
Right.
Okay, you know where I'm coming from? Right. You know, they all anytime you're a black woman and you're considerably real dark or considerably dark, and you have those beautiful broad features, and you talk power. Oh, you must be a man. That's a drag queen. That's a transgender. Well, they were accusing Sojourner Truth of that because of her bold orations against racism and sexism. They were accusing her of being a man. I'm talking about white men and black men. So one day what she did was, when they were accusing her of being a man, she stood up before a crowd of people. She snatched off her shirt, exposed her breasts, and said, "Ain't I a woman?" And that's where Bell Hooks got their title from. Ain't I a woman? Okay. Yes, I'm speaking boldly, but yes, I'm a woman.
Right.
You had to do that. And that's to show you, brother.
Powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful. It's to show you that, you know, like I said, the rash steps that black people had to take in this country, black women in particular, at that time. Okay, you had to do things that were harsh like that, or brash. Okay, brazen. Okay, the times, I mean, you know, we catching hell now, but especially during that time, you know, slavery and Jim Crow, et cetera, 100 years of lynching. Okay, so I said that you cannot speak about women's suffrage, women's rights, without mentioning Sojourner Truth, because she played a tremendous role in women's suffrage, a tremendous role that, in my judgment, is still often ignored by some of our scholars, historians, some of our feminist friends. So that's why I mentioned it. And I said that me being a student of Dr. John Henry Clark, me being a scholar of African studies, of black studies, you know, I'm always going to mention the black role, okay, of powerful movements across the world, or you know, that's my thing. I'm always going to do that. Okay, you know, me being like I said. So I said, make sure you mention. There were, like I said, there were other women. There were other black women, thousands of black women that took part in women's suffrage, but she was the most popular, who, in my judgment, is often ignored. And it's, you know,
very powerful, very, 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 very educational right there for a lot, especially for if there's some young listeners that, you know, because I know they're not really getting African studies, African American history in the school curriculums nowadays. That was definitely on point and needed right there. Excellent commentary right there. And did you touch on the civil rights movement? Because you said it was two phases. So you went
no, I did tell you. No, I did mention that. I said the second phase was the civil rights phase. I said that's when it was more of an activism out in the streets. That's what I said. I said the first phase was women's suffrage, 19th century. Second phase was the early 60s. Into the 70s, women's lib. That was the civil rights phase. That's when they were inspired by the civil rights, by the black civil rights movement. You know, even though the civil rights movement was fairly integrated, it was black led. Okay, it was, you know, so they were inspired by that. And keep in mind, white women are the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action because of those black civil rights marchers. They came in under, like I said, they came in under the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
They came in under the Civil Rights Act. Yeah. Right. So that's what I'm saying. Right. So that's the women's lib movement. So I mentioned that. That's the second phase, the sixth. And also too, what I recommend though, too, to study. Keep in mind that some can argue that there's a difference between black feminism and white feminism, or white feminism and non-white feminism, or womanism. Okay. I recommend that that the listeners get the book called Black Feminist Thought. The author's name escapes me right now, but Black Feminist Thought, it speaks about a lot of that. This is different. This is the Black Feminist Thought it contains the thoughts. I believe it's a book of essays that talk. You know, it's from Black feminists. That's why it's called Black Feminist Thought. And it talks about that. It talks about, it gives you a perspective of you know, many black feminists. It gives you, you know, perspective, how they deal with white women, how they're looked upon, how they're treated in the feminist movement. Yeah, I recommend you read, listeners read Black Feminist Thought.
you know, it's interesting. Like, I talked to another sister about the womanist versus the feminist issue dynamic, and to me, it's almost as if, kind of like what you were saying before, womanist is almost as if to say, listen, I am struggling to be recognized as a human, as almost as you got to recognize my humanity and existence as a human, as a woman, like I'm here. Whereas feminists, when we talk about white women in particular, it's, well, I want to have that same equity and power that white males have. So it's kind of like for black women, it's like a double fight. Like, one, recognize me as a human, and then two, I need to be recognized on the same level as what the traditional patriarchal system in America has for white men. You look at we just left with Barack Obama. He was the first person to even cause a deviation in the tradition of white male presidents. Other than before Barack Obama, it's just been all white males. So that patriarchy is evident, and we're right back at it with Trump. So it's almost, to me, and like you said, I could definitely be wrong in what I'm saying, but I'm just telling you, like, how I feel is like the womanism is definitely needed, because it's like, look, recognize me, I'm human. Like, you have white women that have the privilege, they're just trying to really get that equity and that power, the benefits, the accoutrements that white males possess. Black women have to fight to even be recognized, to even have a seat at the table before they can even negotiate what white women are negotiating. So, very different struggles, but all in the same breath, a very relevant struggle. Let me ask this real quick question, last question, so we can wrap it up. What did you leave with? What did you leave with? What feelings, ideas did you're riding back on your transportation, getting back to New York? What were the reflective thoughts and things in your mind, or were there any? You could have just
well, of course, I was, I applauded, anytime, oppressed people try to empower themselves. Like I said, I have no problem with women's rights. I have no problem with women demanding equal treatment, if you would. Okay, for the most part, I have no problem with that. My thing was, I was just making sure, as some of our black and brown sisters said, I raised the same concern that you don't try to push them to the back, but also don't try to use them to advance yourselves, as was done to us before. That's what happened before during the feminist movement. That's it. That's what happened. You had white women of a certain age group, certain demographic, had got in under the Civil Rights Act after all the work we did, and they ended up becoming the major beneficiaries of affirmative action. Okay, so I thought about that. But I'm asking, what next? Okay, Donald Trump is the president, then you have a problem with that. Okay, what? Now what? You can call him a racist, misogynist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, but deal with it, okay? You're going to have to, okay, how do you plan on dealing with it? I asked Roland Martin a few months ago during the campaign when I was on his radio show, when black people seemed to be panicking over the possibility of a then candidate Trump becoming President Trump, and I asked the question to Roland. I said, in the event of a Trump presidency, do African Americans have a contingency plan to deal with it? And he said no. So these groups that are panicking right now, that are protesting, what contingency plan do you have to deal with it? You have to deal with it. You can't say, you have to, like I said, deal with it now. Okay.
Yeah.
So, my thing is, I thought about that, but also what I did admire, though, in terms of diversity, I admired the religious diversity, because they did, remember, there were various, one of the criticisms of the march is that they they had too many issues that they wanted to deal with. That was one of the criticisms of the march. Critics have said that there were too many issues on the table. There are too many issues on the table, okay? So one person was like, well, good, we deal with all them issues then, okay? But what I admired was that they had the religious diversity. They had Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hebrew, atheist women up on stage, but they definitely placed the focus on Islamophobia because you know what's been taking place over the past several months. You've had reported cases of Muslim women being attacked by people calling themselves
hijabs.
Right. People calling themselves reports of by most media outlets have said that these people have identified themselves as Trump supporters, but then of course you have Alex Jones and some other. I don't like using the term conspiracy theorist as a negative, you know, because being a conspiracy theorist isn't always negative, but you have those who would fall under the category. Right, but I would say those type of outlets, right, and hosts of these outlets or employees of these outlets who will fall under the category of conspiracy theorists are saying that's all propaganda. These people are not being attacked, Muslims are not being, but I know some of these individuals, their brother, who said that they've been attacked or being approached, okay? Okay, Linda Sassor, she's not imagining this. And by the way, you've had some people try to get at her on Twitter, as a matter of fact, going off on her on Twitter, you know, calling her a terrorist. And you had people saying that this was a feminist terrorist march because they had several Muslim women, representatives on stage. You know, one young Muslim sister, she had performed. She's an African-American Muslim sister. She had said, I represent the black Muslim community. And I'm glad she said that because oftentimes dealing with, whenever they talk about the persecution of Muslims, especially since 9/11, my frustration has been that they always go to what we refer to as the immigrant Muslim groups. They don't go to the indigenous Muslim groups. And when I say indigenous, I'm talking about most of whom are African-American. Those Muslims that will either be Nation of Islam, Imam Wabazi Muhammad's community, Moorish Science Temple, Siraj Wahaj, Sheikh Hisham Jabbar's community. Like I said, you know, they're Muslims. Like I said, there have been thriving African American Muslim communities here first, before the coming of immigrants, by and large. Now that's not talking about Detroit, the Detroit area, where Detroit always had a large, as we say, immigrant Muslim population. Okay, but despite that, you still had African American Muslims. Like I said, African American Muslims are still the largest Islamic community, racial-wise, still the largest demographic of Muslims in America. And oftentimes they try to give Islam like a Middle Eastern, so-called foreign face. So I'm glad that they had African American Muslim representation there. You know, because that is my family background, my family coming out of the Nation of Islam. So I'm thinking, you know, it was good to see that. You know where I'm coming from? And a particular sister, young Muslim sister that sang, African American Muslim sister, her family came out of the Nation of Islam, although she's under the leadership of Imam Wabazi Muhammad. She's in that community that came out of that was the original Nation of Islam of Elijah Muhammad. So, and of course you had your Najah, like I said, lone wolf, you know, she's Native American Muslim, you know, her grandfather was Minister Farrakhan, so she grew up in the Nation of Islam under his leadership. Okay. So you had that representation, but like I said, I like that they made clear that they were, you know, that they were against Islamophobia, but they also, like I said, they also brought up the shootings of black men, and I believe they had one of the mothers of the movement up there. I forgot which one. I don't know if it was Trayvon's mother or Everett Garner's mother, but they addressed that. And one sister had said, I think it was Maxine Waters from California. It was either her or her colleague, I think Barbara Lee from California. One of the two had said that, you know, if you're a black woman, you know what it's like to, you know, if you're a black woman raising a son, you know what it's like to be in fear. So Maxine Waters and Congresswoman Maxine Waters from California and Congresswoman Barbara Lee from Oakland, who used to actually, she worked with the original Panther Party. I think she might have been a member, you know, when she was growing up. They like I said, they kept the focus on the shootings of black men. And of course they mentioned Sandra Bland. They mentioned the abuse of black women as well at the hands of law enforcement, because oftentimes we're talking about the abuse of black men. But once again, back to Sojourner Truth, you know, we have to talk about the abuse of black women at the hands of law enforcement. Right. So they addressed that, Sandra Bland and others. but they kept it, like I said, they kept it focused on that, and that's what I liked about, Tamika, Mallory, and Carmen, and Perez and Linda, because they kept making sure they kept bringing it back to that, because as I'm a member of the Justice League, as the three of them are, and that's where we even fight. That's how we started, gathering of justice and Justice League. The killings of black people over the past decade at the hands of law enforcement, across the country. So anyway, I'm glad that it was, they tried to be as inclusive as possible in the issues wise. Now the demographic might be a little different, but they try to give the appearance of inclusivity as much as possible, and I respect that. I respect it, but like I say, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, she had spoken out, and Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and one of the, as they said, the mothers of the movement, just to let our listeners know, that's, Trayvon Martin's mother, Eric Garner's mother, Ramarley Graham's mother, Oscar Grant's mother, I believe. What's the brother's name? I wrote an article. He was shot in the vehicle. Jordan. What's
Davis?
Jordan's name? Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis. Right. His mother. Well, these are who they call mothers of the movement. These are women, black women whose black sons were unjustly killed at the hands of either law enforcement or vigilantes. You know what I'm saying? For the most part, white vigilantes are those who thought that they were white vigilantes, like like Zimmerman. Zimmerman is, some people say, well, he's not white, he's Latino. Well, keep in mind, Latino is not a race, it is an ethnicity, and he identifies, if you can see, he seems to identify, him having a white father, he seems to identify as white, based on how he was behaving in terms of his position towards Trayvon Martin. Okay, I'm saying, and I'm not saying all white people go after black, but that's not what I meant. But he's more indoctrinated into white society. Okay, and his language, they always get away. He said, that's, oftentimes you hear that with a lot of white law enforcement. But anyway, so that was all. Like I said, that was discussed, and he did mention, like I said, Trayvon Martin, all those who were shot down, because they were. Before we get off, this march represented a term that you're taught in activism or sociology. I believe in sociology, it's called intersectionality. Now, intersectionality teaches that every oppressed group struggle is united with the others. So it says that, if you are feminist, you have to be pro-black. If you are pro-black, you have to be pro-LGBT. If you are pro-LGBT, you have to be pro-black. You understand what it says? That all the struggles are united. And so you saw a lot of intersectionality during the march, during the Raleigh/march. And, that was exhibited. That was clearly exhibited, personified, manifested there, because they tried to cover as many issues as possible. So we had women's rights, which were at the top of the agenda, and there's nothing wrong with that, because it was a women's rights march. And then, of course, they dealt with racism, anti-immigrant, which affects Latinos and Muslims, which, of course, they address, like I say, Islamophobia. So you notice you notice the manifestation, or like I said, the exhibiting of intersectionality from each speaker that came up. And of course, like I said, when you saw it on the agenda, when you go to womensmarch.com, you see all that and what they're standing on. But I was saying, are they, the concern was, are they going to build a movement out of this rather than just a march? Well, I think that they are, because they're not like our community, Brother Smart. They're not like black folk. Okay. We, many times, too often in our community, we have feel-good days. Okay, and we don't plan to build anything, and we have to understand revolution is not an event, it is a process. But too many times we have these feel-good movies, these feel-good marches or rallies, and then that's it. Okay, no consistency. Not always, but often. And so I don't think that these women are going to do that. I think these women are going to, they're going to be some follow-ups. But I think that they're, well, keep in mind, the women's rights movement is already powerful. You follow me? That's why you have the National Organization of Women. Okay, the feminist movement, and the womanist movement is already powerful. So I think that this right here would just further solidify it.
Okay. All right. Well, there it is, people. This is the analysis. This is what from a journalist, a writer, a contributor, this is what he saw. This is what he felt. This is what he heard. He did the research on the website. He gave you some historical perspective. And now I guess we're just looking for the follow-up and the work. And I guess that will be quite evident. I've already been hearing some stuff on the talk radio shows, follow-up plans. So that's good. So I guess my message is continue to struggle. It's like Frederick Douglass say, agitate. So,
and Samara, one thing too, keep in mind. Keep in mind too, Samara, I couldn't leave this out. There was a lot of Trump bashing going on, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that it's because you bash somebody doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. But there was a lot of Trump bashing. They were going at Trump. They were straight up going at Trump. And, Madonna. Don't forget Madonna. She spoke. Madonna had said some things that we consider rather inflammatory. She spoke.
Oh yeah, she said some things that I put on a terrorist watch list, but
right, that's right.
But rightfully so though, as far as the bashing of Trump, when you think about women's rights and reproductive rights and sovereignty and control over their bodies, I mean, you have to expect people are going to push back. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, was there anything else you wanted to say, brother, or you want to close it out?
Oh, no, brother. It's your show, family. You close it out. I'm fine. Thank you for having me, my friend.
All right. Well, listen, let people know how they can reach you. Maybe there may be something they want you to come out there and cover, because you also do, freelance too. Like you can cover stories and events and all that.
Well, you can reach me at my website, which is doshonfarad.page.tl, and my name is spelled D as in David, O-S-H-O-N as in Nancy, F as in Freedom, A-R-A-D .P-A-G-E.T-L, and my email address is doshonfarad@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm also you can come follow me on Twitter. And of course,
what's your Twitter? What's your Twitter handle?
I just said them. That's all that, brother. I just said follow me on Twitter. That's why I gave the spelling, so they should have common sense to know what I'm talking about. If not, we do have a few yellow buses parked in the back. Small yellow buses.
And on that note, we are out of here, Steve.